All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for our October monthly CISMA call. I'm going to go through a little agenda here just to welcome everybody. I'll introduce Patrick here to give his presentation, and then kind of as usual, at the end, we'll give some general CISMA updates across the state. Again, thank you all for making the time to come here. There we go. All right, cool. So today we're going to have a presentation from Patrick Belk. Patrick is a master's student here at the University of Florida, where he's studying with Dr. Edlow. He is studying Cuban bulrush, and we're excited to learn more about that species and get an update. And after that, like I mentioned, we'll go through and I'll give some updates. Just a little bit of housekeeping. As usual, I'm going to request that everyone keep themselves muted for the duration of the presentation. After the presentation, we'll go ahead and have a Q&A where y'all can unmute or ask questions. As we go through the presentation, feel free to drop questions in the chat. I'll keep an eye on those and I can ask them of Patrick at the end if you'd like. And also just a reminder that these calls are all recorded and that they are available within a few days of the presentation on our YouTube channel. With that, I think, Patrick, if you're ready to take it over, we'll pass it off. You're muted at the moment, Patrick. You're still muted, Patrick. Hang on. There you go.
Wow, so everyone can see the title screen and hear my voice?
I think everyone's still seeing my title screen. Let me see if I can. Can you hit share screen again?
Yeah, let's see.
I'll stop sharing.
No, you had it.
You all were seeing my screen, I'm pretty sure. Unless I
Okay,
was.
how about now?
No, it was good. Nope, it's blank.
Give it a second.
There it is.
Yeah,
There it is.
yeah.
Ta-da!
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Patrick. Take it away.
Cool. Well, thank you for having me here, and I'm excited to talk to you about Cuban bulrush, the plant that I have come to know very near and dear the last couple of years, working out of the Center for Aquatic Invasive Plants here at the University of Florida. So Christian was gracious to introduce me, and I will take it away now. So what I'd like to, well, let's see if I can advance the screen. There we go. So what I'd like to talk about today is, since I have plenty of time, we will break this up into some sections here. So first, I'd like to talk about just the biology of this plant. What is it? What makes it unique and interesting to us? And then I will go into a section on the ecology, zooming out a little bit from the plant level, looking at the impacts of what this plant does in our environment. Then we'll go into a discussion about the management practices, what we currently are doing, what we know about it, and then I'll end on a section with some of our current research and update on what I've been doing exploring this plant topic. So integral to this presentation is a survey that I conducted over the past year, and how I wanted to integrate that is this, and I'll introduce it with this seesaw analogy. So what we know about Cuban bulrush coming in is not a whole lot in terms of published literature. So peer-reviewed scientific literature on Cuban bulrush is just very scant. We have a couple of good papers on management that really just look at only a few parameters. And the attention that this species has had really up until just the last couple of decades has been very little. You can find Cuban bulrush under its old names in some old publications, but not a whole lot is really written extensively about it. So that kind of creates a problem for us, just this knowledge gap. But the contrast is we have widespread infestations. We are dealing with this plant taking over and is now actively spreading to new areas. And I'll get into all of this more in detail, but the point is a lot of people are dealing with this plant more and more every day, but the knowledge that we have has not been growing, is not grown, only just in recent years. So we kind of thought to ourselves, well, what do you do when you have a knowledge imbalance like this? And there's little published research, but we know that managers across Florida and the Southeast are dealing with it. So we came up with, well, why don't we just do a survey? All right, so we got together and set up this very detailed Qualtrics survey. Maybe actually even a couple people on this call participated in that survey. But I thought that instead of just talking about it, separate from the plant, I would integrate some of the survey questions into my presentation today. So as I go through the sections on biology and ecology, I will include slides from the survey results, kind of to enrich the discussion here. All right, so just a little note about the survey, what it was, who took the survey. We ended up with 130 people took the survey. About half of our respondents were qualified managers that had dealt with the plant or were actively dealing with Cuban bulrush. And the average experience level of those people were over 12 years. So essentially, we multiplied ourselves by reaching out to experienced aquatic plant managers to provide information to us that would inform the subsequent research that we do. So instead of just kind of shooting in the dark, especially when dealing with this species where there's just not a lot known, we could literally explore anything. We heard from the managers themselves, and that's helped to narrow down where we should focus on with this species. So with that being said, let's get into the biology of this plant. So what you see is a really nice grassy field. Unfortunately, this is a floating mat of Cuban bulrush on Lake Miccosukee, and there is water underneath this. I think.
Patrick, I muted you for a second. Sorry about that.
Yeah, hey, yeah, sorry. I think there was
You're back. You're good.
some noise. Okay, all right. So this grassy field is like I said, actually just a floating island. Right now, Cuban bulrush, we're calling the Cyperus blepharoleptos. So for all you plant nerds, you are familiar with cyperus. We call flat sedges. They're notoriously difficult to identify. Most people just really throw up their hands when it comes to sedge work. And I'll admit, when I started on this project, I remember thinking, oh my, I have to work with a sedge? This is going to be a disaster. But no, actually, it's been really interesting. So the old timers, Oxycarium cubensa, this is kind of, Cuban bulrush, as we'll see, is very unique. And so it was really difficult for taxonomists to put it into a genus. It has gone through several genera such as Scirpus. I think it was even in Schonoplectus, and they've invented a few other genera for this plant. Ultimately, with genetics these days they were able to really put it squarely into cypress, but it is quite unique. So another aspect of this plant is it's a C3. Not all, most sedges are C4. Not to get into the weeds about this for you non-plant people. Essentially, it just means that the plant is able to grow a little more efficiently in the shade and in cooler temperatures. Kind of gives it an advantage also in flooded conditions over C4 plants that are more like full sun loving. So it's an aquatic epiphyte. So I'll get into that a little bit later too, but epiphyte meaning on plant. We find that Cuban bulrush is not does not support itself very well, does not establish itself very well without secondary structures. And then its nativity right now is determined to be South America, the Caribbean, and Africa. That's according to Kew Gardens. But not, again, this is based off of very little amounts of literature that we have. So we get into the seed. So sedges, they produce fruit that are called achenes. So they're like basically these corky, dry fruits. And the seeds they'll find little nooks and notches in floating plants or debris. And this picture's perfect to illustrate how Cuban bulrush seedlings just found some water hyacinth pups and germinated from those little cracks. And looking at the vegetative reproduction structures, this plant, like many floating aquatic plants, is stoloniferous. Those lateral growing stems, they're very distinctively reddish. So another thing, like when you're out in the field and you're dealing with unidentified sedges, a good characteristic that you have Cuban bulrush is these reddish stolons and very long roots. So these roots, which are instrumental in its kind of survival, are very long, and they can go, 30 plus inches down the water column. Another kind of thing to note here is the leafy bract. So before the plant puts up seeds, it just looks like a grass. So that image that is shown here on the left, it's very grassy looking. I think with repeated exposure, you can start to recognize Cuban bulrush in the field as I do. It's got this kind of sheen to it and can be a little bit of a darker green than the surrounding vegetation. But one thing to note when it goes to seed is that stalk, or what we call a comb, is not as long as the leafy bract. So if you look and you pick it up, the stem, you'll see the leafy bracts are longer than the length of the comb. Okay, so critical to the morphology of this plant and what really you all need to be thinking of in your heads for the rest of the talk here is that there are more than one biotype. I say more than one because right now there are two, but there may even be more. Some genetic studies are ongoing right now that are looking at a possible third genotype. But for now, we have classified two biotypes. Simply, the difference is the form of the seed head. So on the left, what we're calling poly, it's taxonomically known as Cypress Blepharoleptos Forma cubensa. Forma is kind of this little used botanical term that means like less than a subspecies. So we can't say that there are two subspecies right now, but we can say that they are two unique, at least unique types. And the polycephalus, the multiple seed head shown here on the left, is what most Floridians historically have been familiar with and have dealt with throughout the state, primarily in the peninsula. Okay. With that said, on the right side, we've got the mono or the single seed headed type that we are now finding in the panhandle and what has kind of been moving northward and invading new territories in more northern states. So I'll get to share that with you. Right now, we're not sure. We have not found that the mono type has moved south. Right now, if I go up to like Lake City or towards Tallahassee, kind of in towards Tallahassee area, I'm finding the mono. Anywhere around Gainesville and south, it's pretty much all poly. There's also poly that is in Louisiana and kind of moving around, mixing in with the mono and those infestations around the Mississippi River. So again, here's kind of even more morphological differences. And this hasn't even, nothing like this has really been published in the literature, but this is just from my own collection. So the mono that I'm growing, as shown on the left, has much thinner leaf blades and seems to be a little bit of a more compact plant. It's got maybe thinner stolons and has a lot more plants, per area compared to the poly, which seems to kind of take up a little bit more space, has bigger leaves. Now, here's kind of a first survey question that we asked these managers about, were they aware of the biotypes that we have? And more than half of the respondents said they were unsure as to which type. And that indicates to us that there's just simply this knowledge gap regarding knowing that there are two types. And the range map here, as you can see, it's like absolutely, inundated the state of Florida in terms of watersheds. This is a map generated from the USGS. They put this together, and what you can see, I think I've got a highlighter. So up here in South Carolina, this is brand new. So this one here, this population just came about in 2020. And this population up here actually was just discovered and treated this year. In Arkansas, we also have another infestation that's just popped up about 3 years ago. So we're seeing this spread outward from where it was first reported here in the Mobile Bay back in the late 1800s. It's been here in Florida, for as long as we know, especially in the peninsula. We've been dealing with the poly, but this mono, we're not even sure actually when it was introduced. So another question we asked, what acreages are we dealing with here? And the folks taking our survey we're dealing with acreages ranging from, small ponds all the way up to the 1,000+ acres. So the point is, this plant is not simply capable of just moving into small ponds and areas, but we are finding that Cuban bulrush has taken over vast swaths of large water bodies. Sorry, I'm having a hard time clicking. Okay, so moving into some of the ecology and impacts. What is Cuban bulrush doing? Why is it causing problems? Let's find out. So I'd like to sit on this graph for a minute because it is one of the best things that I have found in the literature to illustrate what Cuban bulrush's ecological niche is. So if you look at this picture, on the left, the y-axis is showing water depth. And so as you start from the left side of the graph, you have open water that becomes colonized with floating plants. Think of, anything from native to invasive, like water hyacinths, salvinias, whatever, floating plants. These floating plants, start to accumulate, they start to get dense and form these mats, as many of you know. Cuban bulrush seeds then germinate within that structure that has just been established. And now Cuban bulrush starts to become the dominant species in that floating mat. And it does so continuously as it is accumulating organic matter and sediments beneath the water surface. It is becoming deeper and deeper. Eventually, it becomes so deep and so thick and full of organic matter that larger seeded plants that grow slower start to germinate within those floating mats, like woody things like Ludwigias and willows and even like maple trees and that kind of thing start to germinate. And then you totally have a transformed system. You're no longer dealing with a lake anymore at this point. You are now dealing with a wetland. And so if you think about it in terms of aquatic succession, as lakes fill in with sediment and organic matter, biomass, Cuban bulrush can kind of be thought of as a successional accelerant. Like if a native system, there's a process by which plants start to move in and transform the system from an open water to a swamp or a marsh. You have Cuban bulrush that comes in and really facilitates this succession and increases its speed. Really kind of comes in and starts this process really quickly. And so as you can imagine, if you let a Cuban bulrush infestation stick around long enough, the costs and the time required to restore that system to its former, pads and lilies or open water, that becomes a lot more expensive and time consuming. So we asked, knowing this, we asked our folks, what species are you seeing out there with Cuban bulrush? Because this can kind of help us to see what are the associations in the environment. What are some, can we predict where Cuban bulrush is going to go? And we see water hyacinth as the clear leader, with primrose, willows, alligator weeds, pennyworts, water lettuce. These are your typical floating plants, emergent. But notice like the sheer number of species here, and the fact that Cuban bulrush, is associated with not only other invasive species but native species alike. It's simply a matter of that's providing that secondary structure for Cuban bulrush that that facilitates its invasion. So here's a nice little picture of Cuban bulrush seedlings coming up out of giant salvinia. And that's an issue because, in places outside of Florida, like Louisiana or now South Carolina, and up the Mississippi, is that, they were, if they're not keeping up with their giant salvinia problems, they're going to start having Cuban bulrush problems on top of that. So some of these negative impacts that have been observed, just the typical impacts you see with just large floating mats of vegetation. It's crowding out native plants. Virtually everyone said that. And it's obstructing navigation, reducing sports, so it can't get in there to fish. And even now changes to water quality with that accumulation of sediment organic matter. And some reduction in wildlife activity has been noted. So I kind of wanted to address something here that's a little bit of a kind of higher level thinking in terms of the diversity that's going on. So if you remember, I told you that Cuban bulrush is a successional accelerant. So it's actually, Cuban bulrush doesn't end a Cuban bulrush infestation doesn't end with Cuban bulrush being a monoculture forever and ever, like say Kogon grass, for example. So it can be a little misleading, even though we have data to support that, Cuban bulrush cover, at a glance can be associated in species diversity. What may actually be happening over time is if you get into those mature Cuban bulrush mats, actually Cuban bulrush will turn itself over into, larger, more woody species. So you can't really say that, you can't just stop after you say that Cuban bulrush uh, crowds out native plants and takes over and no more native plants. It's not, it's a little bit more complicated than that. And this is a cool video. You guys have to see this. So talking about those mats, let's see if I can turn my, see if I can turn this pin off so I can play this video. All right, I'm trying to play this video, guys. Dang. There we go. Dude, check that out. So this is a Cuban bulrush mat that floated down the Withlacoochee River after Hurricane Milton last year. And so it crashed into the bridge on Highway 48. And so it had to be removed. And this is how they did it. So they had to push, well, one, they treated it with herbicide. Then they had to push these things over to the shore and scoop them up with a bucket truck, which is pretty wild to me. And then that's what it looked like after they cleared it up. So, and I wanted to give a shout out to Garrett Snyder because he sent me that video, and I thought it was really cool. But you see, like you see, like the sheer, mass of that chunk of Cuban bulrush that actually, could potentially hurt infrastructure like that bridge. This bridge withstood the jam, but I've talked to folks down in South Florida that told me along canals they've had Cuban bulrush mats actually take out bridges. I'm waiting for somebody to send me a picture of that. I just heard about that a couple weeks ago at FAPMS. That's literally, bridge collapse from one of these giant masses of plants. Oh yeah, here's that. Yeah, look pretty. So transitioning now to management. what we do about this species, what's done. And I'll start with this little illustration that highlights the inconsistencies we've had in management practices up until this point, which is a problem that we're seeking to address. So the example given here is Lake Seminole, huge reservoir that's managed by the Corps. It's also managed by the Stewards of Lake Seminole, a nonprofit organization. And speaking with those folks, they're not on the same page in terms of chemistries to use on Cuban bulrush in their water. And so we started with a question in the survey asking folks, well, how satisfied are you, or how effective would you rate your treatment program for this plant? And 40% told us moderately effective. If you add the moderate effective to extremely, you end up with about 60%. So not great. This is not great at all, actually. When it comes to managing an invasive plant or weeds in general, if we have found an effective treatment, especially a long-term effective treatment that's been widely adopted by everyone, you're going to see the columns on a graph like this skewed all the way over here, where most everyone is saying very effective. But right now, way too many people on this left tail are telling us that their methodology for treating Cuban bulrush is not sufficient, or they're only just saying that it's moderately effective. What are people using? Well, most folks are using glyphosate, especially on smaller scales. So those folks that are managing small ponds, it's easily accessible glyphosate, especially in counties where it's not being restricted right now. And Diquat 2,4-D being the next two most popular. Diquat, of course, because it's the most widely used by FWC. And then you can see, we've got a mix of other chemicals, both systemic and burners, all kinds of different chemistries in here. Here's the FWC data that I pulled. So looking at this one's kind of cool because it has acreages in it. So for like 14 years, so Cuban bulrush has been managed on around like 10,000 acres since 2010. That's Cuban bulrush alone. And a lot of this has been more recently. Historically, they would just treat floating plants as a single group. And so that's been, behind hydrilla, floating plants are the next most commonly treated plants here in Florida, and Cuban bulrush is now joining the list with water hyacinth and water lettuce as being targeted. Diquat being the most common that is being used right now. But as you saw in that video, physical control methods are almost essential, at least at the point where Cuban bulrush infestation has become so large and those mats have become so thick and accumulated soils and sediments that the only way really to effectively get rid of these mats, especially if herbicide alone doesn't sink the mat, is you have to use some kind of mechanical control. And so what we saw from the results of our survey is that actually 2/3 of people who answered this question had used some form of mechanical, either harvesting Hand removal, that's crazy. Excavating and shredding, which is something that we're very interested in. So here's a video of what shredding looks like on orange. So we have a shredding study going on with this 8-foot. It's got twin blades, and it just chops up the mat. Here's another video. Yeah, so not super efficient. I timed every bit of this shredding operation and came up to a nice clean 3/4 of an acre an hour is the rate that he was able to move at. That is far less than we're able to treat with herbicide. This is a very slow and very expensive process. I think he's charging somewhere like $300 an hour to do this kind of work. So the point is, if you have to resort to mechanical control, you're behind. You are behind. And it also highlights the need for finding herbicides that are capable of sinking the mat, or figuring out at what point, in mat age or mat thickness that we can treat with herbicide before having to resort to this kind of very expensive mechanical shredding type operation. I think the final thing that I'll mention on treatment is seasonality. So typically with plants, they go through these cycles of starch allocation and senescing and what have you. We have very little information about that. We just a study was just published a year ago about starch allocation in Cuban bulrush. It was done at Mississippi State, and no type of treatment study has been done looking at when is the best time of season to treat. And asking everybody, well, what time of year do you treat Cuban bulrush? And we got a ton of people that skipped this question. They didn't even answer this question, or if they did answer this question, they were all over the place, any kind of year. So what that's telling us is either, managers are just opportunistically treating Cuban bulrush no matter what time of year it is, and they simply don't know when is the best time to target the species, and tells us that we need to answer this question. So I'll kind of finally end on just a bit here on the current research that we're doing. I don't have too much time left to go into a whole lot of detail about the research, and I think maybe we could have a good discussion about this, but I will run through how we do research on a plant like this starting from a mesocosm setting. So what I wanted to do, because this has not been done before, is run a study with both biotypes. So far, whatever research has been done in the past has been done only on the poly, which I think is the legacy Cuban bulrush. Not a whole lot had been done on the mono, which we think is kind of the new, more aggressive biotype. And we wanted to do the same. We wanted to give them all the same treatments and see if there were any differences in how they responded to herbicide. And the way we selected herbicide or were informed by the survey, what are the most commonly used herbicides, the ones that seem to be effective, and we're informed by that. I do want to note something about kind of going back to the biology of this plant is that when I stocked my tanks last fall, from these sources, I had all of my poly that I collected from Orange Lake, which is not far from here. It's maybe just 30 minutes to the south of the center, uh, died. In January, we had a deep freeze. Many of you probably remember. Some of you, I think, got snow. Others of you, even as far south as Tampa, I think, got a freeze, and it killed all the poly, none of the mono. So that really screamed to us that already there's some physiological differences between these types. We know they look different, but now we know that there's got to be some cold tolerance difference between these two. And I grew them in all these trash cans, these 20-gallon trash cans, separated them out, made sure everything was identical to standardize the mass I begun with. I created these secondary structures, so I didn't have any luck trying to get them to float on their own. So I needed to make these rafts for them so they could establish. Was able to get this done in March and let them grow for 90 days before we treated. Got some growth starting to come in after a few weeks. I did a pre-treatment harvest. This is what they looked like after growing for 90 days. Already, I mean, just looking at how explosive they grew, just shows how aggressive this thing is, and especially that below ground biomass. I mean, filling up those tanks. I did 2 studies. So my first study was with diquat and 2,4-D, those being the most commonly used herbicides as told from our survey. And then I also ran a triclopyr tank mix study. So triclopyr right now is the hottest herbicide for Cuban bulrush that we know. Dr. Gray Turnage at Mississippi State has put out a lot of articles about triclopyr with some of his little trials that he's done, and now it is one of the fastest growing herbicides that's being used in Florida right now. So right now we've got on Orange Lake they just started using triclopyr. It's turned out to be the most promising, and so we did a tank mix trial with that. Not getting into too much of the detail about us spraying these things, but this is how we did it. And then the results, I'll kind of breeze through the results. Looking at injury, so looking at injury ratings, this is how in weed science, we go out there and we visually estimate the percent dead tissue that we see. And right away, you notice that diquat is doing far better than 2,4-D, even between the biotypes. And just something I wanted to note is that comparing the poly 2,4-D treated to the control throughout the duration of the study, there's never any statistical difference between the 2,4-D treated and the control group. So even as now we see that 2,4-D seems to be working a little bit now on mono after 6 weeks, not so much on the poly. So what I'm looking at here is green control on the left, a tiny bit of injury from 2,4-D in the middle, and then a whole lot of injury from diquat over there on the right side. And then after 12 weeks, which is when I harvested the diquat 2,4-D study, statistics started to break down because I saw regrowth. Again, 2,4-D absolutely not working on poly, which is just shocking because remember, 2,4-D is widely used in Florida in the tank mix. So what are we finding out? We're finding out that 2,4-D might not actually work after all. So I'll skip these. So triclopyr, this is just tracking mean percent injury over the time period. And I haven't harvested the triclopyr study yet, and I didn't do in-depth week by week injury on the triclopyr because it works so well that we get almost 100% control no matter what we mix triclopyr with. This graph is just showing that we had growth during the study period from our pre-treatment harvest to the control harvest after 12 weeks, just kind of as a check to make sure that yes, our plants were growing during the study period. And then finally, the most important graph we have is for the Dicot 2,4-D study, we did final dry biomass, and on the y-axis is mean percent reduction, so compared to the control. And we like everything we see coming from Dicot, but 2,4-D is just absolutely failing. And even look at that, the compared, I know that these are in the same statistical group, but there may be a difference here between how the poly is responding to 2,4-D versus how the mono is responding to the 2,4-D, which is kind of even more suggestive of there being some physiological differences between those biotypes. So to kind of wrap up from the key findings from the survey is, I kind of already said, 2,4-D is not working compared to Dicot. And then, of course, the anecdotal observations I mentioned, the cold hardiness in the mono may be different. And I showed you earlier the pictures of the blades, leaf blades being different between the two biotypes. And then there was some seedling recruitment, which I thought was kind of cool to capture on camera because it's hard to get pictures like this in the field. And it's also really hard to germinate Cuban bulrush seedlings if you try to. And so seeing it germinating kind of in the cracks and crevices like how we predict is kind of cool to see. This is not the point of the study, but being able to see that this is happening and being able to photograph it is kind of cool, at least to me. So kind of where we're going from here is I've got those trials. I kind of had shared some videos from the shredding trials we did, looking at triclopyr and flumioxazin. So flumioxazin being one that's kind of lower down on the list, but we had seen, from one previous study, flumioxazin at low rates seemed to have some level of control. So we wanted to see at the field level what that would look like compared to triclopyr, which is our favorite, and then adding in the shredding component, shredding half of those plots and seeing like, well, is there a relationship between spraying and shredding? Does spraying help shredding, vice versa? And I'll go ahead and tell you, like, without showing you these results, that it all depends on the level of mud that is accumulated under that mat. Because what we found is that coming back 30, 60 days later to these shredded sites is that in some of our plots, the mud that was shredded has resurfaced and is now germinating seeds from all kinds of whatever plants are in the seed bank, some of which have Cuban bulrush seeds. So these are some interesting implications. And with that, I'll wrap up this talk, and maybe we have about 10 minutes or so for announcements and questions. And I'd like to thank the Army Corps of Engineers for funding all of my research, and Dr. Gray Turnage at Mississippi State for subcontracting us. And with that, I'll thank all of you for listening, and hope that you guys have some interesting questions. Cuban bulrush.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Patrick. We definitely have a couple questions that were dropped in the chat, and I suspect we'll probably get some more as we talk. The first thing that was mentioned, I'm actually going to rephrase Dexter's comment into a question. He was mentioning investigating ploidy levels with the association that generally species that are polyploid tend to be larger or more robust. And I was curious, Patrick, if you know of any studies that have looked at ploidy and Cuban bulrush.
No, I don't know any studies that have looked at ploidy. We uh, a researcher at Mississippi State right now, Dr. Sam Schmid, he recently finished Gray Turnge's program. He is working on a paper that is that is getting into the genetics of Cuban bulrush, and I will ask him if he's looked at ploidy. I don't think ploidy has been a conversation that has come up, but that's interesting you mentioned because ploidy can also influence herbicide resistance, and so it could be. This is just conjecture, but if the poly has a greater ploidy level, that could be why it was not responding as well to 2,4-D than the mono. So that's really interesting. Thanks, Dexter, for your question.
Yeah, it's definitely a good question, especially when you're seeing those distinct forms, right? It's very interesting. I know a couple of us, I think, were watching that shredding video, and it prompted the question, with a stoloniferous plant like this, does that shredding affect the way that it spreads? Can you get new plants from the stolen fragments after shredding, or does that seem to kill it?
So that's an excellent question, and that means that you're thinking that's a good question. So what we have found is actually that those stolons are pretty weak. They do not regrow very easily. And when I'm out there post shredding looking at what's growing back, it's coming back from seedlings. It's not really coming back from stolen. So actually we think that chopping up the plant is pretty good at uh, at killing it. But very good question. Very good question.
Another question in chat here, asking if the Cuban bulrush sunk after your triclopyr trial.
So we are seeing the mat loosen and kind of break up from the triclopyr. So the unshredded triclopyr trial, triclopyr, we have seen the best action breaking up that mat. Now, again, this kind of also depends on the thickness. So if it's a younger, like on like Lake Miccosukee, so where I treated the mono, it seems to be in the there isn't as much of a sediment layer as on Orange Lake, and we're seeing more sinkage. So where we are seeing that triclopyr is working well to sink the mat, it is also contingent on how much mud is underneath. So that's another great question.
Awesome, thank you. Anybody else with questions? Feel free to hop on.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So what was the percentage that the triclopyr is being treated at? The concentration.
The application rates.
We use the max label rate, which I think is the same rate that I have, which is the same rate that I used on, it's like 100 and something out. Let me go back to it. See if I can actually figure out how to use this thing. So it's the same rate that I used. So right here. 128 ounces per acre. That's Tricera, the product, by the way.
Okay. 120 ounces per acre. Okay. All right. And then another question. Oh, well, I guess statement. So we're treating it here in South Florida in Palm Beach County, and we have a few smaller populations, but we're treating it about twice a year, and we're still not we're still getting regrowth or whatever it is, seeds growing, whatever it is that's happening. It's not enough to really take it down. It's slowly decreasing, but I think we're going to switch to start treating it every 4 months. We're just using glyphosate in those areas so far because they're such small populations. That's just me sharing for anyone that's trying to deal with it. So after treating it this year with every 4 months, I'll see how it does.
So are you able to use, do you have any herbicide aside from glyphosate, or is that just the cheapest, easiest thing that you can get?
Oh, we do. It's the cheapest, easiest thing. Um, but now, I mean, that's why I was asking about the triclopyr, so that we could see if that's something else we could use to see how that works.
Now, triclopyr is pretty hot, and I was just talking with the Allegory rep the other day, and we were talking about how, you know, if you use max label rate, you might actually, and we're not really seeing this, but if you use max label rate, you can have more of a burn effect, and it works a little faster than if you use a lower rate, and it'll translocate a little better. So what you could do is you could experiment with using a lower rate of triclopyr, save you some money, and then monitor that. See if start with a half label rate, going up to a full max label rate, and seeing if you can get control that way.
Okay, has anybody on here already done that and have any experience with that already?
Hey, this is Garrett over at the Southwest Florida Water Management District. We're treating it 0.5% with triclopyr, and we're getting pretty good results. So, with a non-ionic surfactant. So typically when we treat, if we're going after like floating plants and it's mixed in, it winds up getting hit with the diquat. But if we go out and we target the Cuban bulrush, like large monocultures of it, then we're doing it with triclopyr 0.5%.
Great, thanks, Garrett.
Awesome. Alrighty, good data sharing going around here. I love that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Any more questions? Oh yeah, Taylor says she just did with helicopter. Yeah, that we're very interested to know about what happens out there, and that's St. Johns River.
Hey, Patrick, I'm wondering about, the use of glyphosate in any kind of aquatic plant. I know typically glyphosate doesn't translocate in tissues far below the water line, uh, but given like Cuban bulrush's sort of morphology, especially below the water line, do you know if like glyphosate probably doesn't have to translocate that far below the water line to actually probably kill the plant, I would think, because I imagine a lot of those roots that drop way down are just pulling nutrients out of the water column, right? They're not like, it's not like Kogan where the rhizome's a foot or more down below ground. But so I guess, but to your knowledge, does glyphosate alone, I guess, give good control? And is it because you don't actually have to translocate glyphosate that far below the water line?
Well, so that's a really, really good question, and I'm not going to make up an answer and give you some false information. So what I will share with you, we we're not working with glyphosate alone as a treatment, or we're not looking at it for several reasons. One is that, glyphosate is kind of the status of its continued existence is up in the air right now. It's a lot of uncertainty, and we already have municipalities, even in the state of Florida, where glyphosate is not even permitted to be used. So we're very interested in looking at alternatives. I mean, from the past studies that have been done, like the one other study that is published about the screen 10 herbicides back in like 2010, glyphosate was effective. Glyphosate was one of the top four, at getting 80% biomass control, was effective. And I think that's why so many people are using it. But again, a lot of people who are using it are not totally satisfied with it. And we just heard today on this call. So there's a lot of doubt about how effective glyphosate is, number one. And number two, in terms of the translocation, well, these kinds of studies have not been done with Cuban bulrush. But what I can tell you is that, like we talked about the rhizomes, they're not really, these are stolons, not technically rhizomes, and they just do not store a lot of starch or nutrients at all. And the roots definitely aren't. They're so thin and small. All they're trying to do is pull nutrients out of the water. And so I would not imagine, given the morphology of the plant, that there's any translocation that's going down into the lower parts of the plant. But that can't be confirmed definitively without like a translocation study. So that's the best way I can answer your question. Is it's doubtful that it's translocating, one. Also kind of doubtful that it's a great control, two. And then three, just concerns about the future of glyphosate.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, but that's great. That's a great question.
Cool. All right. Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and just run through our announcements. I know we're at time. So thank you all. If you're not able to stick around, thank you for coming out and listening to the talk. I'm sure Patrick also would be happy to get some questions via email or what have you if you think of things later on. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again.
I'll drop my email here in the chat in case anybody needs.
Perfect. Thank you. So just a few announcements. We're still in October, so I left this one in here since from last month. But October is still Firewood Month. This is an event hosted by the Nature Conservancy's Don't Move Firewood campaign. And this is their annual outreach event to help remind folks to use responsible firewood practices. Don't move firewood from site to site, and help reduce the harm or the spread of harmful forest pests. Of course. There we go. We also had an interesting email announcement come out from the Southeast Risk Group. If you're not familiar, it's the Southeast Regional Invasive Species and Climate Change Working Group. It had a species spotlight on tropical seagrass, Halophila stipulacea. Sorry. This is an invasive marine seagrass. It's native to the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean. And there have been a couple new records as of 2024, 2025 here in Florida. It seems to have been moving from the Mediterranean into the Caribbean with vessels, and now it's kind of working its way into the southeastern U.S. in recent years. So this is something that I wanted to promote awareness about and encourage folks to report it if you are seeing it. I also have a couple of job postings I wanted to share out. A handful of these, especially the ones at the bottom here, are closing either tomorrow or next week. So share these out if you are interested. A couple of events on the CISMA calendar. Just as a reminder, you can always go to floridainvasives.org and look at our upcoming events calendar for more information about these events. But tomorrow, October 23rd, the Heartland CISMA is doing this Highlands Hammock State Park a look at natural areas weed control in Sebring. That looks like a very promising and exciting event. There is an Eventbrite link on the calendar. Next week, October 28th, the Central Florida CISMA is hosting an invasive grass workshop this fall. That's an exciting opportunity to go learn more about invasive grasses in Florida, how to identify them, and I think they'll also touch on some management things as well. October 29th, Deb and I are actually hosting an invasive plant management training using the CIPA tool. First one will be in CIPA on October 29th, or sorry, it'll be in Quincy. I might have said that wrong. On October 29th, likewise, there is more information on the Eventbrite on our calendar. Moving into November, we have Lagoon Fest still on November 1st, Lake Worth Lagoon. November 4th, Central Florida CISMA is having their virtual monthly meeting. November 6th, Deb and I are doing another CIPA training. This one will be in Live Oak in Suwannee County, if that's closer to you. Likewise, Eventbrite has all the registration details. And then November 12th, we have the Osceola CISMA meeting, which is held virtually. So just a reminder, this is the last call for this year. We do not have any CISMA calls for November and December. So we'll see you in January with a new round, a new series of calls and new topics. We are starting to put together the schedule for the next year, but where there's still time, if you have topics that you want to see explored, please email me. Even if you don't have a specific speaker in mind and just have an update that you want to learn, anything invasive species related that is of interest to you, let us know so that we can try to find a speaker and put together a talk on that topic. So please do not hesitate to reach out. And with that, that's all that I've got. Thank you so much. And thank you, Patrick. That was a fantastic presentation on Cuban bulrush. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you all in January of next year. With that, I'll go ahead and end the recording. Thanks so much, everyone, and take care.
Thanks, Christian.